Hello and welcome to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton, and welcome back to another Toffee Blues podcast. I'm joined once again by Harry. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, decreasingly, I'm running out of enthusiastic ways to say I'm okay, but not great, and then throwing it back to you for a similar response. And as we kind of alluded to before we started the recording, I imagine that we're reaching somewhat the end of our tether with the niceties that we've afforded the current system, and I'm sure we're going to get into it. But me and myself, mate, Everton aside, I am good. How are you?
Yeah. Again, similarly, Everton aside, yeah, I have to say I'm okay, but yeah, it's got to be said the footballing side of things, as you say, is definitely really starting to try my patience now. Um, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because we've been in such a unique situation the last few years, I think, where I think. I think both of us have probably been much more on the rational side of things, and that with all the
Yeah,
criticism being levied at the likes of Deitch and Lampard and all these managers that have come before, while we've really been struggling, I think we've kind of appreciated that these managers kind of had one hand tied behind their back, and now we're kind of in this situation a little bit where it really feels like we should be kicking on, and yet we it seems to be we're all almost just kind of stuttering where we are a little bit, and there's so many calls for things to change and to do things a bit differently. Because as we keep alluding to each week, teams seem to be working us out quite a bit.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, we're off the back of a 1-1 draw against Sunderland, which I think, if you look at it objectively, it wouldn't be seen as the worst result in the world, I don't think, with the way Sunderland have started the season in a much higher place in the table, going their away, Monday night, crowd really up for it. You can take all these factors into it, but it's one of them where, especially based on how we started the game, it does to me feel like a missed opportunity to get another win on the board. I imagine you're in a similar boat.
I feel like the only positive from the Sunderland game was that we both called the scoreline correctly, and that very rarely happens on this
Yeah,
podcast. I honestly, in all seriousness, think that my bigger problem right now is the club's way of portraying performances or portraying results. I think after the Man City game where we lost, and we sort of said that those games against the bigger clubs are somewhat of a free hit. The club went and released kind of a highlights compilation of just how good Iliman Ndiaye was in that game. And great, like showcase that, right? For me, I get an email to my inbox on Tuesday, Wednesday from Everton, like a solid point on the road at Sunderland. And it's like, but is it? Why are we portraying it as a solid point? Why are we not actually holding ourselves to a higher standard, to a better account of ourselves? Like you say, the start of that game, we were all over them. Like James Garner, right in the first minute, I think could have put us 1-0 up. But that goal from Njai, will get into it. Incredible, one of the best Everton goals I've seen in a long, long time. Grealish hit the post. Like we had so much going for us in the first kind of 35. But again, it's the same problem we had under the previous manager. It's the same criticism that's been leveled at David Moyes since he came back. We have very rarely performed to the same standard for 90 minutes or even like 80 minutes, 70 minutes. Like it's just such short spells in a game where we look good and look creative and you can make decent highlights packages out of it. And yeah, do you know what? When we looked at the November fixtures and we looked at it realistically, we said, yeah, a point away to Sunderland, fine. That was going to be one of the tougher ones. But the longer that we go without picking up 3 points and the longer that we go with this frustration building, it turns the fan base again. We end up in this cycle again of looking at, do we want the current manager to stay? We start throwing all of these things out there that the Friedkins will not give David Moyes time, that they will get rid of him, that they were ruthless at Roma. I don't know if I fully agree with that or not. And really, it just puts more pressure on the team because now we're going to preview it, but this game against Fulham before the international break is critical. And even if we win at Fulham, has the damage been repaired in that one result? not really. No, there's a much longer road back to the road of goodwill than maybe there was at the beginning of the season, and I think it's quite interesting how quickly that's eroded. When, like you say, by the way, we on this podcast, I like to think have been in camp rational when it comes to expectation, when it comes to transfers, when it comes to what we can get from David Moyes, and I think we've been quite fair. But yeah, I'm getting to a point now where I'm a couple of steps behind the let's just keep going with what we're doing road of mentality.
Yeah, I'm completely the same. And on that last point, I think where we're at the moment, I do genuinely think is about where we're going to finish this
Yeah,
season. Um, and obviously, I think at the start of the season, I had us a tiny bit higher, and it's a fine difference between, I think we'll be around the 13th, 14th mark purely because I just don't think Moyes is going to change things too much. And I think if we
yeah,
keep things the way we are, we'll get wins here and there. We won't. I don't think we'll be in any serious threat of relegation, but I just can't see us kicking on any further than this. And I think this squad has got more to it, and that's what frustrates me. Um, I think, as I say, I think the last few years we've pretty much been like achieving as much as we can with the players we have, and I think in some instances you could probably say the likes of Deitch were maybe even overachieving with how many points they were
yeah,
getting with this group of players. And I just don't feel like that at the moment, and that's what frustrates me. And I think we'll get into Moyes a little more in terms of some of what is causing the frustrations we have with him at the moment. But what just to peel back to Sunderland, um, it was a game that did seem to have a very clear turning point, and it's not often you
yeah,
can pinpoint a moment so clearly. And Moyes himself alluded to it in the press conference, and it's obviously it's of the man whose drum I've liked to bang the last few weeks quite extensively. But Tierno Barry got the start. And I think the general consensus, I don't think I'm alone in this. I saw a lot of people saying this, but for the first 25 minutes, and so I thought he was excellent. I thought that he put in the exact sort of performance that I was expecting. I've been expecting from him, and that I think he's shown glimpses of being capable of. I thought he was dominant in the air. His hold-up play was very good. He played a crucial part in the Njai goal. Obviously, that was looked at by VAR. And it's one of them where you could maybe see that being given as a foul. I think it would have been very
yeah,
harsh for it to have been overturned. But what it actually was actually a very good tackle. I think that sets off. Obviously, Njai does a lot of the work himself. It's pretty much the definition of an individual goal, but it doesn't happen um, without Barry winning the ball back. And then, of course, as I say. He has the miss, and it's one of them where the Sky cameras cut to Moyes on the touchline, like proper head in hands moment, looking really frustrated. Um, and obviously it seemed to play on his mind a little bit. He gave away he got booked for giving away a silly foul just a few minutes later. You could tell he was frustrated with himself, and it just screams of a striker really lacking in confidence. And I do genuinely think that is all it is. Um, and obviously, people will levy the criticism out that any striker should be able to score from there. But it's one of them where you think this is the opportunity I've been waiting for so long, and you just kind of snatch it a little bit, and
yeah,
it just doesn't quite have the composure in that instance. And yeah, we've seen it so many times over the years, haven't we? How many times were we saying like Calvert-Lewin just needs a goal and he'll kick on, and
yeah,
he just needs one to go off his backside, all the cliches and stuff like that. But I do genuinely believe it with Barry, and I still think that even if he's not scoring, he's still offering more than Better at the moment, who's also not scoring. And I
100%.
do genuinely think that game proved it. But as soon as that miss happened, I was like, oh, that's all anyone's going to remember now. They're going to forget about the first half an hour where he played really well and was doing everything right. And to be fair, a lot of people weren't, but I still saw far too many people like saying that it kind of overwrites how well he started that miss and stuff like that. And it did completely swing the momentum of the game. The drop in confidence we seemed to have after that, when we could have gone 2-0 up and been in a really comfortable position, but it really seemed to knock us back. And to be fair, it probably more invigorated Sunderland as much as it knocked us back. They seem to think, right, that's a let off there. We're still very much in this. Let's go and get a grip on the game. And for what, the next 50, 55 minutes or so, we just couldn't handle them. And that was the last shot we had until very late on when we finally made those changes that were long overdue, which we'll get into in a bit as well. But yeah, it was such a distinctive turning point, wasn't it?
Do you know it was, but I think the one because we I get the impression on this pod we're not going to be levying praise too rapidly at David Moyes' door. I would say I would have put money on Barry being hooked at half time. And I think the fact that he got a little bit longer, even after that miss, showed me that Moyes is capable in some very small fleeting moments at maybe changing his approach to things. Not nowhere near the amount that we need him to, by the way, to kind of pull this back to where we want it to be. But had he have hooked him at half time off the back of that kind of that moment, I think that would have pretty much and down on is he Moyes Keane in disguise. So
But just sorry, just to interrupt you there, but just to counter that, I mean, it's not like he was given the 70 or so minutes that Beto usually gets when he
no,
starts.
that's very true.
It's getting hooked like what is it, 10 minutes into the second half. I think it's just
Yeah.
almost just as bad as getting taken off at half time. I really do. Didn't even wait till the hour mark, which is where he almost always seems to make his changes, or even begin to consider changes. I still think for me it wasn't the right way to handle the situation. Personally, I still think
Mm.
it's showing a very distinct lack of faith in the striker, even not taking him off at half time.
I mean, but we know that he's got a distinct lack of faith in both of his strikers, and the funny thing is now is with that press conference after the game where he's named that moment as the turning point. For me, it undoes all this work we're led to believe that has gone on behind the scenes over the past week, which is that he's had a conversation with Barry. Barry's become a little bit more sort of like integrated back into the club on social media and things like this, where it seems like he's been told that he was going to be given a run now to kind of go and be the starting striker. That's all, by the way, what we're interpreting from social media posts and gossip. But anyway, that's what we've got to go on. But I think he's just undone any hard work that has gone on behind the scenes there because I think yes, he missed it, but there's compilation footage. Go and put it on YouTube. Greatest Premier League misses and look at some of the names that blaze over from there. Ronaldo did it famously. We know loads of players on their day can put it wide from on the line, as it were. So I'm not going to hold that against Barry, and I'm going to kind of do that whole he's in the position to miss them, which is part of it. He has to be in that position to make a miss like that. Obviously, I'd have loved it if he'd have scored, but I'd have loved it if Grealish had have scored his chance. I'd have loved it if James Garner had have scored his chance. And I think we've got to kind of, it's very easy at the moment to put Beto Barry under the microscope and just say that we've got two very average, below average Premier League strikers playing at Everton, and it's very much like much of a muchness. Whatever one comes off the bench is low on confidence. So yeah, I think that striking situation is a problem. He's not going to get to fix it till January. So for me, he needs to handle it better and he needs to give one of them a run. He needs to stop this kind of one in, one out each game. And he needs to give Barry longer. And I think, and we'll get onto it with the substitutions, I think he could use his substitutions differently and not just have to use one of them on that Barry for Beto like for like switch. So yeah, I get the frustration with Barry. I want Barry to be starting against Fulham, and I want Barry to be starting after the international break, and I want him to be getting longer in games, regardless of how he's performing, and just let's see what he can do when he's got this run to his name, because the confidence is only going to change if he's getting minutes on the pitch and he's getting trust from the manager. And I think I raised this last season out on Moyes about criticizing Beto so openly, so frequently, publicly. He's got to stop it. He's got to stop it. I don't think it's having the impact on either of these players that he thinks it is. And ultimately he spent a lot of money on Barry. The club have invested in Barry and he's got to nurture that talent. And I don't think publicly flogging him in front of like the world's media on Monday Night Football is the right approach there for me anyway.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's a perfect like pathway into what I wanted to talk about next, and that it's a criticism I never thought I'd have to say about Moyes, but I think the treatment he's given to some of our players, particularly some of the players we've signed this summer, I think has been really, really poor. Um,
Yeah.
I would absolutely love, like I said, we're recording this before the presser, but I would love someone to ask in more detail what justified bringing Dwight McNeil on over Tyler Diblin when Njai went off injured, because I cannot get my head around that for a second. Um,
No.
I mean, but just just off the top of my head, that's McNeil's wrong position. He's barely played this season, and when he has, he's looked incredibly poor. He looks completely out of sorts. Is a lot of people have been criticizing his attitude. He doesn't look even remotely up for it for the game. And then on the flip side, you've got this young lad who we've been chasing all summer, was the main talking point of the transfer window this summer, a long running saga, paid a fortune of money for him, really highly coveted last season, and barely been given a sniff. And we've all been looking ahead to AFCON when Njai's going to go off with Senegal. And they're almost certainly going to have a very deep run into the tournament, so we're probably going to be out with him for the best part of a month. He's easily our most um our biggest attacking threat we've got at the moment, even ahead of Grealish. Um, and we all know that it's probably going to have to be Diblin who comes in for him, and he's just not being bedded in at all. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure I'm right in saying he got left on the bench against Tottenham as well last week, so no minutes under his belt at all the last two games, when I think both would have been perfect instances for him to get some minutes on. I just do not understand it. And it the whole sub thing, which was a big thing that was being levied against Dartage during his time here, when he had very little to work with on the bench. I was always the caveat I used to give. You can't give that caveat with Moyes at all.
No.
I think we've got a much more creative bench and a lot more to offer on the bench. And as you say, just swapping the striker around the hour mark every week isn't going to change that much, especially when both of them are as devoid of confidence as you are. Which, as you rightly say, his comments aren't helping whatsoever. Um, and I've seen people saying that, oh, Barry's 23, he's not as young as you think. Like people, like you shouldn't be, we shouldn't be like wrapping him in cotton wool, or people shouldn't be suggesting we wrap him in cotton wool as much as we are. But it's still a new striker coming to a country to play in a country for the first
Yeah.
time, and 22 is still very, very young. I know it might not be as young
Mm.
in football in terms as people think with the whole football manager mindset or whatever you want to call it nowadays, but it's still it regardless, he shouldn't be saying about Beto either, as you say, who's like what,
No.
27. The young thing doesn't factor into it. A manager should really be supporting their players rather than dragging them in the media a little bit. And I think similar about Alcaraz and Will. I think if he wanted to make a change on 55 minutes, because it wasn't working, we did need to change something, absolutely. But I think the Alcaraz sub was right there. Used it to great effect against Palace, him coming on at half time, completely changed the game when we were up against it. Um, and I'll be honest, I thought Dewsbury Hall was really poor on Monday, and it just
Yeah.
nothing was coming off for him. I think that sub would have made perfect sense. I think it would have made way more sense than bringing Barry off when he did. And again, I don't think did Will come off the bench? He didn't, did he? Irabunen was
No. No, you're a
preferred
bit.
to him as well. And
Yeah.
again, I think he must be thinking, what have I got to do to get into this side? And there's several of these players that have been brought in over the summer, and a lot has been made about our business this summer. And a lot of people are quite critical of the fact that all the reports seem to be that Moyes was very involved. And I mean, that's fair enough if you're going to play the players you've played a big hand inside him, but most of them can't get a look in at the moment. He's very stubborn in what he picks, and as you say, it's just like flipping a coin over which strikers are chucking at the moment. Whereas, while sticking with the same side, there still has a lot of gaping issues in it that I think could be resolved, or at least could have a knock-on effect a little bit if you change the personnel around a little bit. So yeah, I thought the subs, particularly on Monday, were abysmal. I think I had a problem with pretty much all of them, which is yeah, it's really not good. And yeah, he's definitely questioned marks. It's starting to be asked over how he's managing these games, I think.
Yeah, you said earlier about with the press conference at the time we're recording this not happening yet, and sort of asking specifically about that McNeil and Dibbling situation. He does. We mentioned it very briefly on the pod last week about the article in The Athletic with how much money is on Everton's bench right now that was spent over the summer. And when you look at the fact that Barry's kind of getting these alternating starts, but not really long runs in the team. Grealish obviously is in that side. Dewsbury Hall is in that side, and probably there's question marks about whether he should maybe be given a little bit of time out or kind of just sort of giving him less minutes right now. But otherwise, all of this wonderful talent that we spent money on that sat on the bench, and you think, well, where Everton were at in the summer, was it really critical to spend that much money on talent that then he didn't see as what Dyche used to refer to as Premier League ready? You know, if we weren't going to play Dibbling at least 20 minutes every game, why did we buy him? Or why did we, why did we pursue him so heavily over other targets? The same with this Adam Asnu as well. You know, we desperately need cover at left back. And when we signed this young kid from Bayern, we thought, okay, good. Like Bayern seemed quite sad to lose him. That might be like a coup for Everton. And he can't get minutes even with the under 21s. He's already had some injury problems. You know, there's been a bit of mismanagement off the pitch there with him. And Merlin Roll, you're absolutely right. Like he's looked creative in spurts and he offers something quite different. And I think this is the thing, right? When you're David Moyes and you're going to play that formation, what you have is the players that can play the positions ever so slightly differently. So it's kind of slight differences in a very rigid system. And your Alcaraz is a very different player to Keane and Dewsbury Hall. Raw would be a very different player to a Ghana or an Idrissa Gana Gay, depending on who he slots in for. And Dibbling would offer something slightly different than an Njai or a Grealish if Njai moved back over to the other side. So you do kind of look at it and think he has got options there and sort of waiting. I mean, the thing that is just the most guilty of is when they equalized on Monday night. Like, just it only ever looked like we were playing for a point, and that for me is just inexcusable. Like, we've had some decent wins on the road under Moyes since he came back, and I just felt like Sunderland were there. Although the momentum massively swung, like Sunderland were there for taking if we wanted to, and I think he didn't make the right changes. And I think going back to this point about even the players he's not publicly criticizing, you could just see in that last minute of the game with Alcaraz, like he's just not sharp. He's just not got match confidence because he comes on and plays a blinder against Palace and then can't get a kick. Like there's players like that who are coming on and contributing to games and then just find themselves back on the bench for an unchanged 11 depending on whether he starts Beto or Barry. Okay, so 10 of the 11 is the same every week. Jake O'Brien is not having his best season, certainly compared to how he started under Moyes, and he is still probably one of the first names on the team sheet each week. There is just an inability to mix it up. And if you're an opposition manager, you must absolutely love it. You imagine your fixture list and thinking like playing Man United versus playing Everton when that lunatic at Man United changes pretty much 10 of his 11 positions every game and who plays in what space in the back line and whatever. But Everton, you must be able to plan for Everton now if you're playing them in March, because it's the same system, it's the same starting 11. So it must just be the easiest game to plan for. And I've never understood this we kind of have the opposite of the Man United problem, which is Man United have bought in a manager, let them spend a load of money on players. The system's not worked. They've sacked the manager. They bring in a manager that has a different playing system altogether, and they end up with this horrible Frankenstein's monster. I don't think Everton have done that with the Moyes appointment. I think Everton for a long time have played this style of football, this formation, this kind of system, variants, but pretty much the same. And again, it's just that the Everton way is not, I don't think the Everton way that we see and the opposition would see is necessarily what we want the Everton way to be. And I do think there is a be careful what you wish for here if we go down this road of getting rid of David Moyes prematurely. He's frustrating, but let's see where we end up at the end of the season, that kind of thing. We know what happened the last time we got rid of him. We had one great season followed by a load of very weird and woeful seasons. So you do have to be careful with that. But I just don't think it's good enough. And I think it's okay, by the way, to leverage criticism at him with the want of him changing rather than with the want of getting rid of him. And I said something similar last season on the pod. I think you can want more from him because you want him to do better rather than wanting him out the door and someone else to take over that group of players.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously there's still no one I want to succeed as Everton manager more than him. But yeah, but as I say, the the faith in him is running thin just because we know him so well and know what he's
Yeah.
like and that he doesn't like to change. And I saw this crazy stat that seemed to go under the radar a little bit that when Dibbling started against Palace a few weeks ago, it was the first time Moyes had started a teenager in about 5 years since he started some young lad at West Ham. Like he doesn't play youngsters in the league. I think yeah, I think that was in the league. I think he was playing the kids a little bit when West Ham were in the Europa League and playing some like easy group games and stuff like that. But in the
Yeah.
Premier League, he just doesn't play teenagers anymore. And I don't really remember that being a thing too much when he was in charge at us. I think about the likes of obviously Rooney, you couldn't not play. But the likes of James Vaughan, Victor Anichebe, um, Jack Rodwell,
Rodwell, Goslin,
yeah, Dan
yeah.
Gosling. There were youngsters that were coming through, and obviously we had a very thin squad at that time, to be fair. So probably a lot of it, his hand was forced a little bit. But yeah, that's a issue that I hadn't really seen picked up upon when we got him in, and with our window this season looking so much at young players, the majority of them mostly under what 23, 22 age bracket.
Yeah.
Um, that's a concern. And again, it talks about what you say, this kind of vision not really aligning up between the club and the manager. Um, and yeah, it makes me think that we were probably right when he first came in that he's obviously he's good for the end of the season, good for the first season in Brownlee Moore to get us settled in and that. But after that, it's probably time to move on and look for something a bit different. And I think I'm very much in that camp now. And as you say, if he's got 6 months or so, 6 or 7 months now, if he proves that he can play more innovative, take a few more gambles and risks, and try and play a bit, just a bit more. I'd say a bit more exciting, changing things up a little bit, like trying different players here and there, rather than just sticking with the
Yeah.
same drudge that we're mostly getting each week. Um, it's almost like a new job interview for him these next 6 or 7 months. Um, and as I say, it's one of them where I don't think expectations should be too high of this group of players. I think, as I've always said, 10th this season, I think would be a very good season for us if we manage to finish there. I think these players are capable of it if they're managed in the right way. Um, but yeah, I just don't see it at the moment. But
No.
hopefully he can prove that he can change things around a little bit. The last few weeks when we've been talking about, yeah, if we look ahead to Fulham now, and we obviously always kind of pick our lineups and what we think is going to play. We always kind of have that little get out a little bit of that. We pretty much know what the team's going to be, and we can just pick the striker out of those two, and that's the only real thing. But I think I think let's this time let's do what we would pick rather than what we think Moyes will pick. And I think straight away I'd be starting Alcaraz. I'd give Alcaraz a go. Um, Dewsbury Hall being dropped is probably not the right word I'd use, but just Dewsbury Hall
Rested.
given a rest ahead of the international break. I think it's fair, and you've got to if you're going to rotate the side, someone's got to drop out. Um, and yeah, as you mentioned earlier, if he starts better on Saturday, I'm really not going to be happy with it because he came on for 40 or so minutes and I just thought he offered absolutely nothing. I think both him and McNeil were such nothing substitutes. And I thought Iwobi came on and did all right and looked quite lively, and Alcaraz I thought looked lively as well, but they were just brought on far too late. And
Yeah.
people were crying out for the Alcaraz sub like 25 minutes or so before we did it. If he brought Alcaraz on when he brought Beto on, I think it might have been a different game. I think we might have nicked it. I genuinely do think that. So yeah, I think Alcaraz has to be given a go. As I say, Barry has to start for me. Um, and yeah, I probably would leave the rest of it. It's got to be said.
Interesting.
Just because I mean there is an argument to be made for trying Garner at right back and putting Whirl in the middle. Um, but I don't know. Fulham worry me a little bit. Because Fulham came to Goodison last season and looked really, really good. Um, and they haven't started this season as well. And again, I imagine they're in a little bit of a similar boat to us, and that is that things are getting a little bit stale for them under
Yeah.
Silva a little bit. But I don't know. It is as we talked about last week. It's definitely a winnable game. This one, so I hope. I'd like to think there's a little more attacking intent going into this one. So yeah, what do you reckon? What would you do?
Yeah, I'm pretty aligned to you, mate. Like Barry has to start. That's a non-negotiable. I think yeah, Alcaraz for Dewsbury Hall. I just want to see what that looks like with Grealish, Alcaraz, and Jai as the three behind the striker. And where if we've got attacking threat behind the striker, what that does for who's playing up front. So what that does for Barry, does that create more chances for him? Does what we saw in early glimpses at the start of the season where he was creating space for that three behind? Does that just mean that those three get more chances? That's a really interesting proposition for me. So I definitely stick with Barry, put Alcaraz in. I kind of would do what you sort of said. Maybe you would, but maybe you wouldn't. I do think I'd drop Garner to right back. And I do think either Roll or I would see what Dewsbury Hall looks like a little bit deeper. Again, I think we're at home, and I think we've got to stop approaching games as if we're one defeat away from getting relegated. I think we have got to snap out of this mentality as a fan base and as a group of players, by the way, as well, that this is not the club that were scratching and clawing for survival with nothing, no money in the bank. I think we've got to start approaching this as we've spent money, and we need to start playing like a team that spent money in a brand new stadium. I think we've got to really up it. So yeah, I would say maybe we bring Rawl in and see what that looks like with him being a bit more attacking, with Alcaraz being a bit more attacking, with Garner then at that right back position. Can he offer more than O'Brien does in an offensive sense of the word? You know, I think what that then leaves is, by the way, this absence of Jared Branthwaite and being able to either rest Tarkovsky or rest Michael Keane. Because if we had the players available, I'd certainly be looking to do that. And again, the gaping hole at left back, like for me, I'd love Mikolenko to just have a little bit of a break, because I just think he's the first name on the team sheet because he's the only player that naturally plays in that position, and he's not offering a lot, is he? So I would make wholesale changes if we had the squad available to do so. But yeah, what I think seems logical is pretty much what you said, plus maybe Garner dropping back. But I agree with you. Yeah, Fulham are a little bit of a bogey team, aren't they? I think at home we'd always, until recent seasons, sort of had the sort of proverbial wood on them. But they're in a similar position to us. I think it'll be a very scrappy, sort of confidence bereft game where there'll be a lot of sort of like fluky shots, and I don't think any goal that goes in will be particularly clean unless Njai scores it. So.
Yeah, so yeah, on that, can we get a prediction? What are you thinking?
Do you know what? We normally do what our sort of our head says, right? In the same way that we pick our lineups based on what Moy says. I think I'm going to go with what has to happen, which is I think we have to win this by two clear goals. I think we've got to win this 2-0. I think we need a clean sheet. We need to get goals again. We need to be winning a game comfortably. We need to start putting teams to the sword. So yeah, I don't necessarily know if it's my heart over my head this week, but yeah, I'd say 2-0 because I just can't. We have to win a game going into an international break.
Yeah, yeah. I'll stick with my heart as well then and say, yeah, I'll say 2-1. Barry to score and cup his ear at David Moyes. That's just
Do
yeah.
do like the Suarez dive celebration in
Yeah.
front of it.
But yeah, just to get his confidence hopefully floating, especially going into the international break would be
Yeah.
lovely for me. So yeah, fingers crossed. As usual, we'll finish off on the lineup quiz, and it's me asking you this week, and I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying you either did really well or really badly last time. I actually can't remember now. I've said it. I had in my head you had a really good
I
one, but I
think a
think.
couple of weeks I had a good one, and then last week I think I got ahead of myself. So
Right, yeah. Well, yeah, I think I went into this one off the back of you thinking you'd done really well last time, so it's a bit of it's an old one. I'll
from the
gonna
70s,
it's
like
not quite that far back, but it's yeah. So we're going back to the 8th of December 2007.
okay.
Okay, and a 3-0 win at Goodison Park. And again, as usual, as I usually try and do, there is a reason I've picked this game, but we'll get into that once you've or named as much of the lineup as you can. So yeah,
Goodness me.
whenever you're ready. So prime Moyes, this probably about the
This
best
is
Moyes
prime
team we
Moyes,
had.
isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah. Okay, let's go for some familiar names that we'd have had from that era then as a bit of a free hit. So I'm gonna go Tony Hibbert.
It's a slow start. Hibbert's not in the squad.
Is he not? Oh
No,
God,
he's
this
not
could be
in the start.
quick.
Well, the issue we've got as well is that because it's 2007, there's still only five subs. So you've
Ah,
got a
okay,
bit less of a safety net underneath you as well for this. So yeah, no
okay,
Hibbert on the bench. Must have been injured.
okay. Let's go. Arteta.
Arteta started. That's one.
Great. Okay, yeah. I'm gonna go Tim Cahill.
Cahill, yep.
Yeah. Okay. Stephen Pienaar.
Pienaar, yep.
Yeah. Okay. Oh man, Phil Neville.
Yep. Phil Neville started at right back. That's four.
Baines.
Baines, yep. Five.
Yeah. Oh man. Joseph Yobo.
Yep. That's six.
Okay. Tim Howard in goal.
Tim Howard in goal. That's seven.
Okay, nice. Who'd have played with Yobo at the back then? I don't know if this was a season. This might have been a season or two too early. I'm gonna say Jagielka, but I don't think it was.
Jagielka came off the bench to replace
Okay,
Baines. Baines went off injured, so Jagielka's
got
on the
you.
bench. So it's not an extra one, but no life lost.
Okay, let's go Lescott.
Les Scott, that's eight.
Okay, nice. And then what we got here? We got the striker, a midfielder. Let's go Yakubu.
Yakubu, that
Yeah,
is, yeah.
nice. Oh man, it's just like that additional. I'm gonna. Oh, this might be controversial. I'm gonna go James McFadden.
McFadden's on the bench,
Oh, okay,
so
nice.
still no life
Pretty.
lost.
And we've got a midfielder there as well, haven't we? Osman.
Osman, that's 10.
Yeah.
One player left to get.
One player left to get. Osman. Okay. Gosh, who could it have been then? I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Lee Carsley.
And Lee Carsley rounds it off. Look at that. You were on a
Nice.
roll there. That was amazing.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
really proud of myself.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, I said I was it's one of the more lucky ones we've got in terms of injuries. Like
yeah.
by the looks of it, usually when we pick a Moy side, it's usually like there's all sorts of players in there that like he was clearly like having to scrape around at the bottom of the barrel for. But yeah, that's a very Moyes '08 lineup, that to be fair. So
Yeah, I think
and
so.
yeah, so just a round off the bench, another we always talk about the sub goalies, don't we? Stefan Vessels is an absolute
Yep.
icon of that category. Jagielka, you said, McFadden, you said, and then Andy Johnson and Victor Anichebe would be a very attacking bench as they used to
Who'd
be
have
back in
thought
those
it?
days.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah,
when Everton used to have four strikers,
yeah.
impressive.
Um, and yeah, as you say, you mentioned Yakubu started up front. I picked that game because Yakubu scored a hat trick. So, um, yeah, a complete polar opposite to the striking situation we've got at the
Yeah.
moment. So, hopefully, thing Barry to repeat it this weekend. Let's run it back. Let's run it back. Right. But yeah, so yeah, that rounds off this one. Please leave a like if you enjoyed. Comment below, giving your thoughts about the Sunderland game, where you're at with David Moyes, if you're at a similar position to us, or at either end of the spectrum that you might very well be on. Subscribe to Toffee's channel for more Everton content, and we will see you in the next video at the Toffees.